or however you are hearing or viewing this conversation right now, welcome. It's a pleasure and honor. And I am joined here today by someone that I have just the utmost respect for. And respect isn't even the word. There's another word. I don't know what it is at this moment. Let's use respect. Just admiration, adoration, admiration. This individual is just someone that is like in my top 5 of people that I've been tuning into, particularly over the last 2 years, but especially over this year in recent months, as all of this is a way to consolidate everything that's been going on. And we're going to get into some of that, and we're going to unpack a lot of this, but this individual, Michael Tsarion, he is an incredible, just an incredible mind, an incredible spirit, incredible soul on the planet right now. This, I believe, is our 6th actual live recording. This will be the 5th one that we've done on my particular platform, and I had the honor to join you on the Unslaved show about 2 years ago to be a guest on your show. And what an incredible joy it is every time that we get to converse and drop in. And every episode is so dug down, rich, deep, and goes in its own unique direction. And this one is no exception. So, you know, this is gonna be an unfoldment of topics here. And as we get started, first of all, I just want to welcome you, Michael. And how are you doing in this moment?
Well, glad to be on. Excellent. I love that background, by the way. That's really hits the mark. Music, yeah, yeah, good. A lot of projects going on, actually. So, despite the external reality, I've been more productive than ever, which is what the plan was. Whether there was a lockdown or not, the plan was to be more productive because we're doing top drawer stuff. You've been on the show. We want you back, you know, and even in that field, your field, there's so much to unpack, you know, about the healing of the body, the soma, and we haven't even lifted the lid on that. We've had some great guests, and we need you back because there's even more I've got on that, more reading, more study, you know, and I want to talk it over with you, this whole idea of this parasympathetic system and how to nurture it,
yes,
what its function is, and how it interacts with the rest of the body, the polyvagal.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot to visit, so it's good that we're connecting now again.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we'll have you on within the month.
Yeah.
Within the next couple of months, actually, to go into this because it's a vital field. But yeah, everything is going well project-wise.
Beautiful. You just opened up a door I think I would be remiss not to walk through, and thank you for that. Yeah, the sympathetic, parasympathetic whole conversation, and really just the understanding of the nervous system, right? And that this is a really interesting door that you just opened up. Great way to open up this conversation. One of the things that I've been really tracking and tuning in throughout this entire series of events, let's say, that we've been experiencing in our world, the false flags, the quote unquote pandemic, the riot wars, the whatever you want to call all this stuff, these planned scripted operations, psyops. And we definitely want to go into that. What is a psyop? But the effect that it's had on people's state of well-being, their mental, emotional state of being, their psycho-spiritual kind of conflict of, like, you know, how the nervous system responds to somebody's faith, really, their ability to actually have faith versus being trapped in a state of uncertainty. And I think that's really an interesting place to open up with you, because I've felt it in myself. I'm a human being and I have knowledge, but it also has to be embodied knowledge, right? Like, I have a lot of intellectual knowledge, as many of us do, but the rubber meets the road when the body kicks on, and the anxiety and the panic and, like, oh my God, what is going on? I'm seeing all this stuff from the media and these, you know, it's like, it's just craziness. And people are going through some deep internal challenges, to say the least. So you just kind of open that door. And I wanna just, I don't have a direct question in this exact moment, but I think you can kind of run with it. You know, the challenges people are having psychologically, emotionally, and physically, trying to make sense of what's going on.
Yeah, and that's partly rational, but my work, your work, we keep insisting it's not just irrational. You don't want to leave the rational out, my goodness, never. But it's part of the rational to take care of the, what I call centroversion, which is how do you feel about yourself at this given moment, and a second later, let's look at that again. Yeah, and almost literally, because that's what introversion they call it. But introversion, centroversion, whatever terminology you want, there's an inner reality that you have to attune to, because 2020 is just that much more chaotic and destabilizing and disorienting. But life in general is. Didn't we have a Second World War? Isn't it, aren't there hundreds of wars, hundreds of traumas, economic ups and downs, the crash of 2008, shall I go on, right? Let alone the domestic and other issues. So this is just, another shakeup. So you're always going to have them. And you're always going to have the external pulling of the rugs, and like you say, these strange events to throw us off kilter. And you're going to have the wise one who makes sense even of a very extreme bad time like this, where it's a little bit peaked. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter whether it's peaked or not. Anyone who experiences a trauma, they will come out the success if they understand that it's a matter of healing. It all comes under what is healing, where am I not healed, what can I do to up that game? Unlike the rest of the people who are just so frozen with trauma, because trauma is meant to freeze you. Watch any animal that's caught, and then a big adult comes across, even if the adult's trying to help that little animal, the animal just petrified, doesn't know what's happening. So big government looks at us like that. And we also must sort of share their vision, but in a sort of a strange, reversed way, which is, yes, I'm traumatized. Look what's on the news every day. Look at my domestic life. Look at the issues. Look at some underlying health issues that I may already have, right? Which are going to be exacerbated because, it's like going into the clinic, and the clinic, they're taking a reading for your blood pressure, but going to the clinic raises it 20 points. Bit of a paradox, wouldn't you say? They're the cause of, you got a really high blood pressure there, folks, Joe. Yeah, being in here and being told to wear a mask, or, just the whole ambiance of this nightmare, and the lie that I know it is that I can't express to your face. Yeah, let me give you a good reason why it's up 20 points or whatever, right? So the system makes us sick. Right. And so then it becomes very easy for them to either get you completely into lockstep with a political ideal, but they know there's a few since the 60s, they think they're free. There's a few out there who just continually dissent. Yeah, but they'll be netted by the law of attraction cult or some guru or some community or some other boogaloo. Oh, conspiracy theories, alt-right, not alt-right, alt-left, not alt-left. They got you one way or the other. So health is equipoise. Health is returning to the within in the center of everybody. Go, what do I actually feel right now? There's the influence, and then there's me being free of that influence. And acknowledging how strong that influence is on me, what somebody else is saying, what mom and dad, what uncle, what school teacher, what the president says. Yeah, influence is always going to be in our lives, but it's part of influence to say I can step back completely from it in a stoical way. That's what stoicism is. Mm-hmm. And say, how do I feel about myself right now? That's like the first step towards sort of psychosomatic healing. And then if you do it in a sincere way, not just as you say, a rational way, you'll then sit with the question and not look for the answer so fast, so quickly, which is another modern thing of modernity. Now you're dealing with technology. No, sit with it until the body answers, until the deeper parts of you, they always want to answer, but you crowd it out again with more influence. So not, hardly anyone listening to us ever lets the question, percolate down through the system and then reemerge through different centers of the brain and the body. The brain has whole aspects of it, like the parasympathetic, but the back brain, mm-hmm. the brain stem, the right brain, mm-hmm. is also a form of communication. And we don't even give the time. We ask the question and want the immediate, dispenser to dispense the answer. Right. That's not how you relate to the psychosomatic energy of the body. You have to give it time to fathom and sit there with it as if it's an elder, because it is. Wow. It's a great ancestor, which has a history, that is why do you think it's, we don't, it's because it's unfathomable? Try, the reason why, can you fathom the ocean in the teacup? No, well, guess what? The psychosomatic energy of your body is like a vast ocean, vaster than that. And it will wash up secrets on the beach, but you have to be in a certain comportment, to receive it, and a certain, and not worry about, influences other than what's coming from within. It's essential. And these traumatic times actually assist with that. That's why I'm not traumatized. I think it's actually good, because it actually ramps us up and say, what is really ill about me? Am I getting really anxious? Is something not working? I was on a really good regimen there, but the trauma of the day and the trauma of the people around me and the village and the town, they're affecting me. So I've lost the thread. The wheels are in the rut. So it's then again, like extra effort, like muscle tone, let me get back. Hey, hang on a minute. I'm glad for this, because this now, I'm not following the headlines. I don't care, right? I'm stoical. I want health. and I want to do what I need to do to get it.
That's absolutely brilliant and so true, and made me think of a few different things. One of which is this sense that, well, we want answers so quickly to reprieve our discomfort, right? We want that relief, and rightly so. Like, it's not fun being uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, and it's not always obvious, especially if it's not like, oh, I tripped and I fell and I hurt myself. That's an obvious discomfort, and we can deal with that because we know the source of it. It's kind of like, it's rational, it's obvious, right? Cause and effect. But when it's like kind of an existential angst, then it doesn't have an obvious causation. It's not like, oh, I can't like track it, and it can be kind of this psychic disturbance. And I certainly know what that feels like. And I had, what you're just mentioning, so interesting, because today I had that. I've been doing really good the last week and a half, last 2 weeks, like feeling like, wow, I've moved through a lot, because I have moved through a lot. The more I've unpacked, and the more I've taken a chisel to my conditioned brain, whether it's the subtle iconography of our culture, subtle celebrity, kind of not worship, but like even thinking these people are who I thought they were, and going through and chiseling away all my conditioning, it made me a bit raw and feeling, and I had to feel like the depths of what's been going on underground this earth of this earth, and through my explorations and studies. And I felt tremendous pain. There were times where I cried for hours just thinking about children, and just processing and feeling. And then the last 2 weeks, I've been good. I've been doing really good. Today, I felt this onset of stress, like these waves of stress coming over me. And everything you're saying is so true, because I was able to at least acknowledge that this is just what it is. This is physical sensations. Like, I don't need to go on a rabbit hunt and go down the rabbit hole and try to figure out, like, why did this happen, or why am I stressed? What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with me. There's something right about me, right? But I get to breathe into it. I get to feel this experience and breathe into it. And I reminded myself, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. The world is freaking crazy. Of course I would be feeling this. It's only a matter of time that I would start to feel these sensations, because man, there's a lot going on right now behind the scenes, if you will, of the hologram. And and I had to acknowledge that. So I just want to kind of like just mention that, because everything you're saying is so absolutely on point.
Yeah, and of course we had the Edward Van Halen passing away the other day. That's caused a worldwide stressor. Not because anybody really, some cared about him, but just the death of an iconic figure like that, again, swells say the futility, let's take it that way, in other people who've heard the name, don't know much about the music, but a death of an icon. It could have been a great actor, that sweeps the planet with a kind of mortality feeling. I'm an existentialist, so I'm okay with that, but everyone isn't okay with it. They don't want to be reminded of the horrible finitude and all of that, But the thing is that we live in representations. It's like, behind your head, there's a crotchet. So in music, crotchets, what is the other ones? Quavers, semi-quavers, right? Whatever they may be, they just represent a musical note. They're not the music itself. Just like alphabet represents the images, which represent an emotion, right? It's the emotion that we care about. So the images and the words always represent the underlying emotion. And so when we live in a repressed Europe, repressed America, full of emotional plague and armoring, as Reich would have called it, yes, it will take special events, sort of volcanic, sort of very seismic, in order to get you to feel again. So as you say, it goes in rhythm. Some days you'll feel, more equipoise, and that's great too. You always accept those. And then there'll be days of discomfort in that sense. But as long as you know that this is the music of your life, this is the symphony of your life, it has quiet parts and it has louder parts. Sometimes very inaudible parts as well. But that is the symphony. You can't have just one note carrying on forever. You can't just have one beat or one mood. That's just horrific, right? You don't find that in any of the decent music anyway. It's always up and down. So, but don't get caused in the representations of it. And the representations is what you see in the media. It's what you get from other people. It's all the extrovert aspect of it. It doesn't really impact your own healing, which is the removal of armoring, which is now impossible. I mean, you have to develop techniques because it's so difficult. Our society, the cage that you're in, prevents the release of this armoring or emotional plague. So this is why one has to pick up and study healing. Absolutely. It was known anyway that we talked earlier about different traumas. During the First and Second World War, the dietary habits of the whole of Europe changed. And that's not just the stupid reason because, they were on rations. Years later, the studies were done in Denmark of the eating habits of the older who had experienced the war and the younger guys who hadn't. And there's like papers on this. And they pertain to other countries as well. Because it was attitude and psychology that changed people's relationship to meat, to milk, to water, right? In fact, you know what they actually noticed? The DNA was being changed through this circuitous dietary thing because it linked back to trauma.
Wow.
Now with the face masks, now with this nonsense in schools, right? And all the rest of it. And also a very deep misunderstanding about your own immunity. Every single one of those people who wears a mask, I would say to them, well, your faith in your own immunity is pretty low. Because that's what it signs, isn't it? We don't even need to get into the science of whether viruses and bacteria surrounds us every second of the day, and all the nonsense of it. But obviously, if you slap one of them on your face, that tells me that you, big and brawny as you may look on the outside, you have no faith in your immunity.
That's right. The
whole of Sweden seems to have it. Why don't you? So it just spirals out of control, right? And if it wasn't that, it'd be something else. Your kid can't go to school or whatever. Yet our garbage is lying on the streets once a week, all open and festering. And, and people in masks are handing you a pen. Can you sign here? Please? Oh, yeah, right, well, there you go.
Totally.
Give us some coins when I buy a Mars bar. Here's the coins from the till. Yeah, nice mask you get on there. That'll take care of it. I mean, where do you start? Where do you end? The shopping carts, I mean, what. So just like they've noticed that obesity went up when smoking was cut. I'm not saying one or the other, I'm for it. I'm just noticing the fact that when smoking was finally, curtailed drastically in England, where they took the cigarettes away from shops and they made it a little bit more expensive and a lot more expensive. The very experts and specialists have noticed that obesity immediately from that same year started going skyrocketing. It's not rocket scientists. You don't even need a clinic to tell you this. You don't need. It's obvious to you, and your own family people can see that depression went up, obesity went up, overeating, gossiping. You take away one crutch, we find another. That's not healing. Reich would say, keep moving the furniture around on the Titanic. You don't want to come to me. You don't want to learn what real healing is, how to talk to your body, and all the rest of it. Get rid of this armoring and this emotional plague. Keep moving the furniture around. Then I'll just watch. It's like a circus. We'll have a good laugh sitting here watching you all.
Okay, you just hit something important. I want to connect it to something you mentioned in the beginning. So you talked about like, oh yes, people find like another new age thing or this and that, and that's actually a topic I wanted to bring up in this conversation. And I'm going to connect those two things, like this addictive, compulsive, this repetitive, compulsive addiction tendency that we've all been programmed through compulsory education, just the whole culture itself. Like Terence McKenna said, culture is not your friend. I've just begun to wake up to the depths of what that actually means myself and realize like, wow, this whole thing is designed to be an addiction playground. Like this whole thing is just based on hijacking people's trauma and their intellect and hyper intellectualizing people, but disembodying them from the feedback mechanism of their actual body, which we alluded to a little bit. This thing around the new age, I want to bring this forth because you're the best person to discuss this. I have witnessed more and more, especially as the political circus and charade has taken effect, and I've seen certain figures within that whole demographic come out and just completely like go forth with like Biden and Harris and we got to defeat Trump and this whole rhetoric. And I'm just like, it's like become so bifurcated literally between right and left, which is a weird, interesting metaphor that we could, extrapolate. But I've just seen these characters that were very well-known spiritual thought leaders or whatever. And now they've literally like swung over to this very strange leftist, collectivitionist kind of Marxist kind of whatever message, I guess. And what it seems like to me is that they're showing who they really are now that we're at a point in human history where the timeline has gotten it's gotten to some kind of completion point. in my perspective. Like, we are getting to a completion point within a whole cosmological timeline, and it's like, this is where everybody's cards now get flipped upside down, and it's like, now cards are on the table. Who's who is now being revealed. That's a lot to throw in there, but I'm really just kind of yeah, one point is like, yeah, I'm throwing in the new age thing and kind of wanting you to run off that, because you've done some great episodes in the past really talking about this better than anyone else I've ever seen. And yeah, maybe I'll kind of leave it at that and let that go where it will.
Well, thank you very much. And it did start about 20 years ago in this 2012. Now, that was 10 years or so ago, when people were talking about that Mayan calendar stuff. And I immediately took it. It's in Architects of Control. It's stated in there as clear as I ever could get it, that it's an age of revealing is what has begun. Not that 1 year, but a cycle to come. And it will have many other major milestones. And that's all happened. And so the age of revealing is upon us, and that's a good thing. But it's Plutonic, and therefore it's not a good thing to a lot of people. They're not with it. They're more solar or Jupiterian or Venusian or whatever. So it takes a while for people to get into the vibe of it, and it can take 20 years. That's just the way these larger cycles are. So remember the other systems, the solar, the Martian, and I apologize for using astrological language to your viewers who are not familiar with this, but it's just a rhetorical device at the end of the day, right? But these Saturnian systems, right, have been in play for a long, long time. And we grew up in the midst of them, like a fish in the midst of the water. So it's not a simple, even those who are a little bit awakened find it very difficult to, change or shrug off or even work with, because you're not meant to shrug off, you're meant to integrate it. The Saturnian is a very necessary part of our lives. The Plutonic is as well. So how do you integrate such deconstructive and constructive sources? And also then with the social programming as well, right? And part of that, when it comes to the health issue, the way to break it down, I did it in a recent article that's on Dragon Mother, right? The Dragon Mother site. And that is that we have been taught to be disciples of unpleasure, right? Disciples of unhappiness or negative happiness, meaning happiness, we think we have a wrong definition. We think we're happy, but it's actually a kind of negative happiness because we've never enjoyed the real thing to know that this is not joy, this is not happiness.
Positivity movement.
That's part of it. It's not, they've run with it. And through them, more people have been contaminated. But I think it was just the general trend. I think they just surfed the wave of what was already there. I'm sticking very close to what Wilhelm Reich would have pointed out. And he would have even suggested that before that group came along, you had your religion, you had your psychology, your psychiatry, which is already giving you the happy pill mentality. Your religions were often, instead of keepers of the soul and knew how to work with that sorrow that you have, or that despair at the time of a loss, they all became jamboree, get your guitars out, you long hippies and Rastafarian drums banging. And the 60s group, people went for that. So now you had some spliff smoking, dude sitting up at the Presbyterian church and go, "Hi, kids, we're going to have a sermon today." And they were trying to just find, the whole of religion was in a meltdown. And so they were trying to find whatever trendy thing worked. Of course, it was horrific, right? Bean bags and sing-alongs and marijuana and this extreme acceptance. And so they were selling you unhappiness. They were co-opting your discontent, but offering you something completely inauthentic, where your Ayn Rands, Nathaniel Branden's, Wilhelm Reich's, that type of person, your Alan Watts, your J. Krishnamurti's, lots of others I could mention, even Bruce Lee, a big mentor of mine, were all saying, no, please don't go down that road. Yeah. And don't forget your roots. You have cultural roots. Don't try to lose that and fly off in the little yellow submarine of your Beatles and your pop rock stuff. That's all good and dandy as well, but don't embody too much of a Dionysian libertine mentality. These guys are millionaires. It works for them. They can have all the bimbos and all the rest of it. But look, ordinary man, watch it. Sample that by all means, but don't Yoko Ono it to death, right? It's not going to work for you. You're going to uproot yourself and you'll be lost. And many were lost. Many went insane. And then you're quite right. Then there comes this more crafty. I was right there when it happened. This crafty law of attraction stuff. Think and Grow Rich crowd. It's called what is it? The New Thought Movement or whatever they call it. Yeah, so that's gathered ground. Me and David just did a very good thing on it within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
tying it into the Gnostic cult. Yeah. So, but if it wasn't that, it'd be something else. You know, the TV just keep pushing it with these idiotic Folgers smile commercials and everything. So we bought it. But the thing is, when you install unhappiness, negative happiness, and you install unpleasure, the other thing cannot get in. That's the problem.
Yes. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many interesting just areas to go with that. One of the things I guess I just want to kind of go for the jugular on a particular point that's wanting to come through me here, Luciferianism. So I've been unpacking this particular concept for a number of years, and more so in the last 6 to 7 months than ever before. And it's kind of like it's been put in my face so much, like the reality of Satanism, satanic blood cults, like, and you know, some people listening, I think most people follow me and have been following my Facebook antics over these 7 months. You're not going to be like surprised by any of this. But I'm just going to throw these terms out there because it is what it is. And what is being revealed to us in an alarming rate, an accelerating rate. And I feel like we need to get a handle on the reality that has been, you know, that's been hiding underneath the surface or behind the scenes. And so when I say Luciferianism, I throw that out there. Where I'm kind of going with that is when I see this hyper positivity movement, as you put it, the one seasonal, you know, kind of like emotional living, like, no, I'm just going to be happy, happy, happy. That's like false light, right? Like that's projecting false light, and it's a distraction. It's like shiny bells and whistles and consumerism and addiction energy, and like just feeding on that, but getting us completely unensouled. What I mean by that is to detach from our actual soul, which is a full spectrum of human experience, the positive and negative, the pleasurable and uncomfortable. And so I've really been unpacking this whole thing around Luciferianism. One level of that is realizing that our world and the system that's been running the world is literally Luciferic, right? And, you know, getting into like what these beings believe and what they worship and all that, that's, you know, maybe that's a different conversation. But when I see these things, before I used to think like, oh, it's just clever marketing, and that's one level of it. That's like a superficial level. But the entities or the energies or the forces that are actually propagating all of this, there's a clear deception and manipulation going on behind the scenes, right? I think that's what we're all kind of waking up to. And I'm already noticing like there's a lot of different bullet points that I'm wanting to map out, but I don't want to go off track or kind of lose the topic here. So I'll try to phrase it in a question to you, Michael. What is your perspective on the Luciferian agenda in our world?
Well, first off, to say is that really it's winning. And that's partly connected to what I said about how long it is. You know, it's been going a long time, and we're born into it.
Yeah.
So we don't even know how to get around it to see it. We take half of it as normal. You know, our context earlier was about the bodies aspect and how the whole relationship of our minds to our bodies, right? The cerebrum, you know, to the soma is part of it. But, you know, from the more sinister conspiratorial point of view, there's several ways to approach that. We try two, and that is that one, I see all of those societies you're talking about as really wings of a much vaster Gnostic cultism. And this includes a lot of Eastern normal, not satanic or Luciferian, mystical Eastern path, so to speak. I would call them pseudo mystical if you really had to break it down, right? There's so that needs to be understood. That hasn't been contextualized by anybody. You know, you just say Satanism and Luciferianism, whatever. And that sounds so bad, you know, that's like, oh my God, tell me all about that. You know, I want to know more about that. But many people leave out the fact that that is but a subset, actually, of a much larger cult. It's why they believe in it, because they don't really think of themselves as satanic anyway. You'll hardly ever find one that actually calls
this up real quick. I don't know if you've ever seen this. This is a map. It's basically the cult of Baal, starting with the Canaanites, and it goes all the way down throughout all these different iterations. And what dawned on me, and this seems accurate to me, what dawned on me is that all these beings, whether it's the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, Sumerians, Pharaohs, Roman Empire, the Jesuits, Vatican, Knights Templar, etc., what dawned on me is I realized these are most likely the same exact people reiterating throughout history all the way up into now.
Oh yeah, remember they've had. I would say that these groups that you just listed, there had these beings within it. I would never say that any of these groups are themselves anything evil, but within, just like it is within Judaism today, Christianity today, the group that we're talking about is a chameleon. I've said it so many times before. Is a chameleon that has used many fronts, and as a matter of fact, that chameleon, that hidden force, doesn't like those fronts either. There's times when it wants to shrug off the front. Well, that can turn into world war, that very desire, and it has, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, this larger cult is very wealthy, and therefore they were able to be behind a lot of different. They're actually a cult that on paper wants to renounce the world, right? Just like so-called these evangelists, yeah, the ones with a fleet of Rolls Royces. So the Gnostics are the same. Their renunciation of the world is a big thing for them. Yet they're the bankers. They've got themselves in everywhere. And sometimes they'll rear their heads through a sort of quasi-Gnostic group. You got this around the 1940s and 50s when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered and the Nag Hammadi. And I think it was the Nag Hammadi texts that were the more Gnostic. The Dead Sea Scrolls were just more iterations of what was already in the Bible. I think of them as sort of having Gnostic elements, but if you really had to pin it down, it would be this other cache of documents, the Nag Hammadi library, that was mostly a Gnostic canon, right? With elements of Hermeticism thrown in. And so around about that time, that gave the trigger to some Gnostic cults to re-emerge a little bit. They got all antsy or whatever, and then through the Rosicrucian order, through the Masonic orders, through some white brotherhood type / groups, and these are all before you get to the 70s rising cult, the California new movements, new thought movements. What we're talking about just precedes that, 40s, 50s, and so a lot of Gnostical movements came up. Yeah, okay, they were a little bit hybridized, they were a little bit more modernized. That's only inevitable though, but in essence they were that group. But the thing is that rather than being renunciates, which is, I always remember a lot of other Eastern cults, and they were the same, right? Absolutely loaded, and then I'm talking about renounce the world and all that. But the Gnostic cult is as well. So the wealth alone, and then they have an inherent contradiction where they try to live monastically. They have a very ascetic, outlook on life. This would even go for these Eckhart Tolles and Rhonda Burns and yet they're billionaires.
Right.
Right. I mean, I for one have never been able to work that out. Right. So I just observed it. So there's that to bear in mind, that the Luciferians, the kind of thing. And then what you do is you start, once you've got that piece in place, you can start now to really grasp the totality of what those are. That Christians, have come in and said, they're Luciferian, they're satanic. But that's great. That was one door in. But unfortunately, when you pull back further, you find that the Christianity ain't much different. So you wouldn't know that. But once you see what Gnosticism is, I'm sorry, but Christianity is a Muslim. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are also Gnostic, permeated with Gnostic ideas. So that chart you showed, it can include Christianity. It can include this cult is very, very powerful, and it takes a lifetime. I know, because I've done it, to go through all of that and find out where the Gnostic elements, and when you sniff them, to be careful and distinguish them from, say, the Hermetic tradition, which is more pagan, and I consider to be truly mystical. But that is a whole other conversation. I don't consider the Gnosticism and the religions and the dogmatics, and all these silly Luciferians, right? That's like play school stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot to learn in that. Even my female Illuminati would be a branch of this Gnostic group, except they're extremely eminent. So I've come at that in many different ways. And again, just in the last few weeks, we've done another one on Gnosticism, sort of a part 2, and there'll be more to come. I'm even doing a premium on it very soon. So.
Beautiful. We'll definitely have everybody tune in where to go for all of your material, because I'm basically the best I can do in this is skim the surface as we kind of flow through. We're basically just surfing the waves here. If you guys want to go way deeper, which that's the only thing Michael actually knows how to do. That's why I love talking to him, because he only knows how to go deep. And that's why he does 2+ hour interviews or deep dive presentations on all these different topics. One of the interesting things, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's so one of my big awakenings recently was awakening to I'll just say the reality of our cultural projection screen. What do I mean by that? I mean the celebrities, the actors, the actresses, and then really what's emerged is the reality of human sex trafficking and child trafficking. And you've known about this for many, many, many years, I'm sure. I'm sure you've seen through this whole COVID situation and the lockdown has had some kind of interesting awakening effect, which I don't think was the intention, right? People are at home and all of a sudden all this stuff is coming up. It's being unearthed, and it's like the fish tank just got shaken so hard. And now all of a sudden you're seeing human trafficking disclosure, sex trafficking disclosure. So I'm pretty sure Hollywood doesn't even exist anymore at this point. I'm pretty sure the whole thing just got completely shut down. That's what I've heard, and that's what it appears to be. It's like there's been such a complete flip around. This is where I'll go with it. There's been such a complete flip around in terms of awareness that it feels like all the years that someone like you's been in this disclosure movement, the truth movement, it's almost like all that momentum, it seems like, has just hit and something detonated in the collective consciousness. And now it's like, what was unseen it seems to be fully seen, at least by my echo chamber of what I see from people. I'm curious, here's what I'll ask. What has been your experience over the last however many months of what's going on in the collective from that perspective? What I've seen from because before COVID, I was just as much influenced by maybe certain athletes or certain actors. Not that I was into it, but I'd watch movies. I'd oh, Tom Hanks, he's Forrest Gump. Oh yeah, of course. And then I had to wake up months later and I had to wrestle with my mind, and I realized, oh no, wait a minute, Tom Hanks is an actor. And then I took it a step further. I'm like, he's an actor playing the life of an actor. But who that character is some kind of construct that has nothing to do. That's like his side gig, in other words. That's just his side job. And I'll, just as one example. So I've had to rework a lot of the prior conditioning that I didn't even realize I had. And I didn't realize how false my own interpretation of reality was. And that was quite an experience. And I've seen so many other people all over the internet and just regular conversation have very similar awakenings. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. And when Ricky Gervais just punches them out at the in Hollywood, even though it's under the rubric of humor, my God, your heart leaps. And there's been other rock musicians and other people who have definitely seen the light. We have thousands and thousands of doctors. So whether you or me work out what the hell the COVID lie is, it doesn't really matter as much as top professionals, and that's exactly what's happened. I would always say that an awakening like this is both, heartening,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time disheartening as long as people are not being empowered legally. So I've been trying to post a lot of stuff about how you can fight this mask wearing nonsense and all the rest of it through legal means, right? Nothing too in depth, but just enough to drop that little pieces of ink into the water that while everybody is celebrating, they're celebrating in a way that still is, to me, somewhat disempowered, right? Because I've been saying from day one of my career that forget politics, try to find out more about the law. And this is to countries that really shake in fear at the very idea of a lawsuit or consulting a lawyer and all this. Is you have to deal with this problem. But I use 2020 as another springboard for that, and believe me, I wouldn't be doing it. I wouldn't be saying anything I haven't tried myself. So, and now fortunately, there are a couple more. I put it on my blog on Unslaved. So there's definitely. I'm really for. I really back any particular time, no matter how insignificant it is, where I see that element come into play, where people say, "I'm really sick and tired of this." I'm mad as hell. I don't want to take it anymore. But instead of running out into party politics or waving a placard or getting into silly little debates online, I would rather that they, posted, say for instance, on social media, a bunch of things that come from more the legal side. And unfortunately, none of the people that I know in this movement have done that. Right, the big names Not one of them has bothered with this. And these are people, sometimes they're up in their 80s and 90s. You think that by that level of years that they've been working on this, that they would have at least scraped by that solution, if not be experts on it. And yet there's not a peep out of them. And so that's very, very disheartening, you know, because there are, your civil rights are being violated. There are no statutes on the books. No matter what the government draws up in 5 minutes, that's just window dressing. It actually has no legal power over, you know, we don't want to explore this, but I'm just saying in general, you know, you need to consult a paralegal or a lawyer.
Like the difference between a law and a statute, they're not the same thing.
No, no, they're not. Remember, when you go into places, right, and you see even some twit has posted up on their pizza place or pharmacy or shop, must wear a mask. You'll always notice that down below it, there's no statute or bylaw mentioned. Well, you know what? How good that is and how much law is behind that? As much as stand in the corner on 1 foot when you come in here. Don't pick your nose in my shop. So come on, folks. Right. What I'm asking you, you know, and you can even point that out, but you wouldn't point it out to the clerk because they don't know anything. You say, who owns this place? Are you going to really insist that I wear this mask? I wouldn't if I were you, because it's, you can't turn a recommendation into an enforced rule. You know, you can't make it. But if you want to, then just give me the address of, you know, the owner, and my lawyer will be happy to send him a document that shows, you know, all about it. Just watch their expressions after that. They'll go for low-hanging fruit. They won't bother you again. And this is including a clinic or a school. Once you do this, you're free forever. And even across the board, do it to PayPal, do it to Amazon, do it to whoever the hell messes with you, right? So that's the thing that I always have a standard. I have that as a standard. You know, because I love these, you know, I got it from Eustace Mullins. I got it from some of my great mentors, the Ralph Eppersons and stuff. And I swear by it. The man never spent a day in jail, Eustace Mullins, right? He had done hundreds of court cases and he pretty much won every one of them. So it's not really that hard. And we have to set the bar high in this movement. Sorry, well, the bar is set quite high in a university, isn't it? In some other situations. So there's no reason why, you know, we should just walk through life with blinkers on. And in this conspiracy movement, we have the right, you know, to set the bar a little higher for people and say, you know, you really do need to read up on this. And there's plenty of books that you can. See, one thing is that when you walk into a law room or a court, or even see a program on it, they show you these, you know, rows and rows and rows and rows of uniform books and pretend that that's what you've got to know in order to defend yourself and your property. It's absolute nonsense. It's just one book of statutes. It's just one, you know, it's just one book of statutes. And then there's some other things that you should know about law of evidence, who's my witness, you know, the case file that they're going to use against you. You get one of those. So you just know the technique of going through the case file. And you can win 9 times out of 10 if you do the things I'm talking about. See, but people don't know anything about this. And I'm not talking about some weird sovereignty law or any sort of a corporate, what was that called? I'm not talking about any other law than the law of the land. We're not talking about any other fringe version, you know, or, yeah, all of that nonsense, right? That doesn't protect you, as people have long found out, right? The CCC codes and all of these things. I'm talking about the law that any lawyer, any judge will respect, and they'll respect you. So, as long as you go in with extreme decorum and never be accusative or loud, you will get a hearing. This is something that this movement has not taught. So people, when I say it, they think you're crazy. I know different. Well, no, I know different, right? And the fact is, as long as you stay respectful and within the laws of evidence, you can win your cases. And it's not that hard. So setting the bar up there is something I do. And unfortunately, in 2020, where this should have been, you know, I wish this had been picked up. Then we'd really be rocking and rolling, right? But unfortunately, no, here we go again, you know. It's still a little bit shy of that. So then, yeah, I'm not as heartened as maybe other people would be. But you're right. I don't discount the other things you've said.
No, yeah, I mean, well, for me, I feel like the imperative to integrate those other things is because what's been going on literally underneath the earth has affected, it's affected every geometry of the human experience, but it's all been unconscious. It's all been tucked away into the ancestral brain, or the traumatized brain, as you've talked about many times, the right hemisphere of the brain. And since it's an interesting idea. If that is the case, then that would make sense why we become so left brain dominant as a way to displace or to push away what's going on over here. And we can't even access it. So we're just like, nope, rationale, logic, inversion of logic eventually. And just like, no, we can't deal with that because, oh, that's just conspiracy, or no, there's nothing going on. What are you talking about? It's all this hyper logical intellectualism. But what I've discovered through this whole disclosure process is what I'm going to call all this, is some of the people that I felt were incredibly brilliant minds and had a very heightened intellectual development. I feel like a lot of them are the easiest to hijack because it's just like, oh yeah, the CDC says this and this and this, and so I'm just going to go with that. I'm like, but what, do you not feel anything? Do you not sense anything? Like, do you not have any instinctual awareness that this is all like something other than what we've been told? That's been a pretty interesting process for me to observe the yeah, just where the intellectualism that we've been that's been so promoted versus like natural creativity, all that kind of thing. How easily it is to hijack somebody who's just all about logic and statistics and numbers, versus like the felt experience, being able to actually sense that something's off.
So true what you said. Yeah, and it's that entrenchment again. You feel that you're in mud, and you think you're not. Saturn represents that, amongst other things in the zodiac. You know, the entrenched beliefs, the entrenched patterns. Specifically, what you're talking about is the emotional plague, because Reich calls it emotional plague, is the inability for you to be in contact with your own body's needs. You're not centroverting, because if you did, you'd know that there's disequilibrium. Yeah. You're not happy. You're not in balance. And you'd find this out. See, it's a weird thing, unless you find out that that's there, you don't fix it. But so the capsule is, the catch-22 is you don't go there to find that out. So it's like window dressing. You have the superficial feeling. I feel just fine, yeah. And sometimes it takes you to have extraordinary events occur around you to upset the external balance. What that's all for, from an astrological, metaphysical point of view, is to get you to address that you're off balance. It's a weird way, yes. Jung talked about it, that the fate within, if it's disacknowledged, if the state of your mind or your being is disacknowledged, then fate, things will occur in terms of fate. He just meant on the external level, meeting you on the road that you're going on, that will then make sure that you have to confront that particular issue.
You got to confront the
dragon, this is just extraordinary.
Isn't this the whole karmic samsara wheel that we keep on going down? Like every reincarnation cycle, it's like you got to face the dragon, right? It's like, nope, I didn't have the courage to do that, or I didn't have the wherewithal, the awareness. I got distracted. This turnaround, so I'm going to have to get reincarnated and come back in order to like actually get the lesson, actually face the dragon, so to speak. That's like in all of our kind of parables or allegories, that particular theme, and that's kind of how I interpreted what you just said.
Yeah, it's good that it does, because it's almost like fate knows we don't have the courage. So it says, yeah, we're not going to leave it to you. That's where the conscious and unconscious split is. So the fates go, if it was left to you, you'd never. So these things we're talking about that occur in time and fate and space and destiny, they occur in this very unusual way. You can look at that, like you said, from a point of view of Eastern philosophy or from a Hegelian point of view. All it means is that there's a process going on. Now we experience that process we're talking about in extremely tangible ways. It's called desire. Right? The restlessness, somebody would say, oh, it's process philosophy. It's all the highfalutin stuff. It's Hegelian dialectic. Well, it's just desire. Hegelian dialectic is just when you look under the hood. Right? And then you look under the hood and it's desire. It's human desire, which is the ultimate process. In the East, have their misinterpretation of it, and we have our misinterpretation of it. Hegel was right on the ball with what it is, but it's a very complicated thing, desire. But the very basic level, it's a process, one that we start with, and we experience it as a restlessness that's constantly reaching out. I constantly use the metaphor of the rich man in his driveway saying it's not enough. So even the top people in the land. So this is where Hegel got very misunderstood, of course, because Marx messed up his philosophy big time and made it look like it was some sort of a opposition between the rich and the poor, which we're still living out, by the way. The political parties of our world are obsessed with this. And all he was really saying was, no, my dialect is experienced by the lords as much as it is with the slaves. I'm not talking about polarities between people. I'm telling you that the slave in his dungeon and the rich man on the hill are creatures of desire. I'm talking about what consciousness is, the same patterns of consciousness and emotion and outlook, right? And all of the structure of our minds and our consciousness is the same in all human beings. Now, how could you get that wrong? They did. And it changed the history of the world getting it wrong, for goodness sake.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's really interesting and very clear, and that obviously brings me to mind like a timeline of like the inception of the eugenics movement, and then I mean, that's what I'm seeing, that's what I'm personally seeing, and all the research kind of rabbit holes lead me in a particular theme, and one of the themes recently has led me to restudying like how the eugenics movement came to be, and the certain players, including Bill Gates Sr. And a number of other interesting characters that were part of that whole movement, and how that's just changed its marketing speech, and Planned Parenthood's all just changed its marketing pitch. But it's like literally right now we're at a particular point where that whole what am I trying to say here? That whole kind of what's the word? It's like I can't use a different word than Luciferian. It's like harmonic or Luciferian. It's whatever it is. It's definitely the opposite of good. Let's say that. And it's playing out right now in our technocratic worldview. And I also want to throw in here the collectivism, right? Because those are they're kind of parabond together, right? The eugenics movement, collectivism, socialism, communism. These are different terms that kind of explain a different sliver. But when I put them all together and I opened my eyes and I was like, oh my God, these are all like sisters and brothers of the same exact force that seems very anti-human, anti-life. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. I'm looking for the anti-life was the word I'm looking for. Why that just came up from what you said, I don't know, but I wanted to mention that and get your perspective on that.
Oh yes, well, say you're fascists that we've got ruling now, in the form of Obama and Hillary and Biden and people like these are fascists, right? But a fascist, when you want to ask what is that, it's a socialist.
Mm-hmm.
And our world has not just downloaded that yet, although in 2020 some good progress has been made, like you alluded to. What is a socialist begs the question, right? Well, there's where you're really the jumping off point.
Yeah.
But we won't go into all of that. We'll just say that once you are a socialist, like a Karl Marx or any of them, right? A Robert Owen, you know, a Fournier, whoever is one of these socialists, including all the British parliamentarians and what have you, your ideas are nonsense and your narrative is threadbare. Now, because they hit you in a certain way, you really get involved, and it appears that the narrative is really something complex. There is nothing more uncomplex than the socialist narrative.
That's a good way of putting it.
You know, yeah, because they're using the media, remember? And the way the media works is like a Svengali to make you think this is so deep. Oh my God, I'm really being stimulated by this. I got to get out and help everyone. You know, all of their paradigms. But the thing is, once you really have studied it all the way through, and then you also know its rebuttals, right? You find out that this is probably the most meager, facile, inane, and ultimately insane of all paradigms. It has little pieces of truth in it, but they're imported from other groups like the humanists, you know, and don't even think for 1 minute that the aspects of socialism that were good are generated by them. You know, they come from Kropotkin, you know, they come from Proudhon, they come from mutualism, you know, and many other things I could state is where they come from. And they come from liberalism, for goodness sake. And I've got no problem with liberalism as it was, you know, traditionally. But under the guise of British liberalism, you see, then entered in these Fabian socialists or communists and Marxists and all of that. And they use that as the sheep's clothing, particularly in the American milieu. So it takes a while. You've got to read your Douglas Murrays and your, you know, some of the great authors that I put on my website. So you got to read them to unravel just a few of these parts. But once you get it, you're on your way. It's not that hard, you know. And then you look back and you go, oh my God, their narrative is threadbare. Oh my God, I had to be 16 and in school to believe all of it. Go, yeah, that's right. That's where it comes from. But your teachers bought into it and they're not 16.
Yeah.
So then you start to see, okay, and then hopefully all I can ever hope that people will do is then you pick up the opposites. You know, you say, I'm done with that. What is an alternative? So you start reading your Alan Blooms, right, and your Charles Murrays, and you get into the great thinkers who have the opposite, the Ayn Rands, you know, many people that I mentioned throughout my work. And then, yeah, then you're on your way. Then you can, you know, throw away the stabilizers and nobody need to tell you anything. You dive right into the deepest stuff, which has more sane, which is truly rich, which is truly deep, and is really based in a deeper human understanding of man
Mhm.
that is utterly, completely separate from the socialistic nonsense.
Yes.
And also you get to know the media's, when the media wants to distract you from the actual argument, it'll talk about, some other thing. He was mansplaining. Can we just get back to what the actual
Yeah.
thing was about, the actual subject matter? No, because we don't want you to know about what the subject was about, or that he smashed this woman's face in. So we're going to talk about some other politically correct stuff. Look, our world is learning. They're not dumb, right? The 20th century, in the 2020, people are now realizing this shell game that the media plays, and is laughing in their faces. Every move they make, they bring about the opposite of their agendas and their policies. It's extraordinary to watch, actually.
It really is, and that was kind of what I what I alluded to on the surface of the media deception, and how people are literally just waking up like popcorn. It's just like bing, 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 bing. And I'm just watching it on. I track a lot of different YouTube channels just to see like, okay, what's going on with like certain alternative sports commentators. That's when I realized like, oh, the NBA is like, there's not going to be an NBA soon. Like I didn't realize what was going on in professional sports with all this like social justice warrior stuff, and Black Lives Matter, and all this like it becoming a political stage. And then all of a sudden all of their ratings completely are tanking. It's like, what? That's like basketball. Like that's like in football. These are like these are like the main entertainment hubs, and all of a sudden just common people are like, yep, this kind of lost its flair. Like it's just become a platform for political agendas and propaganda. We're not gonna pay. We're tuning out. Like I'm just seeing that on multiple iterations of the cultural platform itself, and I'm just like, whoa, there's a theme going on here. Because in my little echo chamber of reality, I'm tracking like, okay, what's going on with like the white hat military operation? What's going on with Q or QAnon, or what in that particular way? Is JFK Jr. really alive? Like the sex trafficking and the child trafficking, like that's where I'm tracking, right? But I'm seeing some themes play out from the how do you put it, like the midwell to the underwell? I don't remember the exact terminology, but like the underground and what's on the surface, and there's a connection going on here. And I feel like there's a whole kind of restructuring happening that may not be obvious, but I think it's very much felt. And I do feel like we are moving through some kind of the end of an epoch, the end of an era where there ain't no going back. No matter what happens, there ain't no going back to whatever we were in before. There's only moving forward. And so with that said, I want to ask you, what do you feel like we're moving towards?
Well, I never think about that.
Okay.
I only look at what the hell of the illusions or lies are being burned down. And you're quite right. I've said on many podcasts that we could actually be in America at the end of the Democratic Party as an entity. And if it exists, it'll be down on where it should be, amongst the whale droppings, the little commie red AOC, little basement somewhere in their green army jackets, and they're reading the Das Kapital, all that.
Wow.
Reading the Communist Manifesto. It's where it should have been. And, we've had all forms of iterations of it with the Weathermen and the Black Panthers and the terrorists and all the boogaloo stuff, So the vision that I have, and it's based on what's happening, it's based on an empirical reasoning of what's occurring, is that people, a lot of people just go back to a default liberalism. And, I'm fine with that, right? But the hard radical experiment of the absolute left, which is really basically identical now with the Democratic Party, is kaput. It's imploding.
Yeah.
And China was behind it, and not just China. There's other groups behind it, but they have they've saw that when they went into overdrive, it didn't pay off. It didn't work. So they're packing to leave. Right? There's lots of Chinese millionaires, not the good guys from Hong Kong and places like that who are capitalists, but I'm talking even about the communist bad guys. They're packing to leave. They're packing their money. It was found out. It's been Jimmy Lai and other journalists who are right on the scene have shown this, that this is, he was arrested. But the signs are that there's going to be an implosion in China, and I'm hoping for one, because then it doesn't mean boots on the ground from the West. It doesn't mean even economic shaking up. Donald Trump has done a lot of economic shaking up to them, by making inroads, working synergistically with India, who used to be a very dyed-in-the-flesh communist country, but they've shaken that off, which is really good to hear. And now they're looking to the West in a very legitimate and pro-Western way, not as a fifth column, but as a respectful group of saying, hey, we tried communism as an experiment, it didn't work. We like what we're seeing in America. We like the president, so we're going to open up negotiations, and they have. And that is something that's going to really shake up, China in a big way, and hopefully it'll implode within. They already have a dichotomy between the president and the prime minister. I'm hoping that things like that, I think when you see those in a country, it can actually be a good thing. But temporarily before the fall, there is this hardening, right? There's a fascization. There's a hardening of the hard types. And remember, the hard right we're talking about are not right. These are communists. These are socialists. So that's a setting that some people have to still get with, to realize that even fascism is a form of socialism. Mm-hmm. This will help orient. And it's still early days yet. A lot of the world still need to grasp that point. So in China before the fall, it's like a tooth that's rotten. It needs to artificially be strengthened, right? Mm-hmm. So it gets really, really, really rigid just before the end. So my feeling is that it is ending. And then if China was to fall, there would be a domino effect where socialist groups throughout the world, these Merkels, even the Swedish version of it, would pretty much collapse. A lot of it would default to a sort of a liberalistic position, which again, as I say, it's not my favorite cup of tea, but I wouldn't object to it. Yeah. It's certainly better than what we got now. And in many countries, it would be a legitimate return to conservative traditional, values. And we certainly could have that. So that's about the way I would look at it. But I've looked at that years before 2020. Yeah. I've been looking to that, for a long time in America, because since Woodrow Wilson, certainly with Roosevelt, FDR, and moving onwards up to the world wars and what have you, it's been a catastrophe. Communism of various types, run by the Jesuits, run by South America, run by card-carrying communist agents, has been full steam ahead. Yep. And we've got to turn the tide on that, but the thing is, because the narrative is so bankrupt in and of itself, yeah. I keep using this word law of implosion, because it's good to have external forces against this monstrosity. But as a matter of fact, within itself is the dynamite that can really, blow it from within. Actually, and a lot of commenters don't speak about that. But to me, I grew up amongst extreme Marxists in Ireland. So I have had a chance to look at their anatomy, and it shows me that they're so pathological, right? That there's a good chance that they lose it. It's also a paradigm that C.S. Lewis took on and wrote about explicitly, and it really deeply affected me when I read that. So I've always been a believer of that, actually, as well as the external, forms of confrontation.
Mm. You mentioned pathology, and that's really the best word, the most technical word that and insanity, which they go hand in hand, to explain the characteristics, to explain the behavior that I've just witnessed over these months, particularly from the media, particularly from the far extreme leftists and the people that subscribe, whether consciously or unconsciously, to that whole narrative. And I've been using this word to explain my perspective, which is that people are caught in an insanity field, like a quantum field, right? Like people are literally stuck in an insanity field where there's like insane babblings and insane arguments, or Donald Trump said this 20 years ago in the locker room. It's like, what are you talking about? What does that have to do with anything? But it's just like people are in this insanity field, literally making things up as they go. And that's what it feels like to me, right? It's like literally they're just like, the media is just like making things up as they go. And it's so blatant and so obvious that it's totally a show, like completely. I've come to realize like, whoa, this is literally a show. I knew it was a show and I've said it was a show, but whoa, this is like full on like a show, and it's playing out to this election. So with that said, Michael, I'm curious, what do you feel what is the relevance of this election in your perspective, your worldview here? Like with everything all considered here, like what is it?
Well, everybody's talking about the new normal, right?
Yeah.
I find that an interesting phrase. And that is, to me, things will go back to normal in a normal way. Donald Trump is working well, I think, and there's infinite amount of things I wish he would do more. But that's, again, we're only talking about the end of one flipping term, so let's see what happens in the second term. But you see, a few things are lacking. Even Donald Trump can only do so much, meaning the administration can only do so much, right?
Especially
What we
when
should
there's
have.
been so much opposition the whole way through.
Yes, of course he has. Of course he has. And he'll probably continue to an extent. But he can take it on the chin, and he has done. I admire that. I admire the fact that he's not ultimately a politician. I have no problem with all of his belligerence and the things that people accuse him of as being very brusque and all. Sure, I'm from Belfast. I mean, that's like fresh air to me, right? So, but the thing is that what's happened, like when you just mentioned these leftists nitpicking and all, they do this because they are psychotic. And if you've ever had to deal with anybody neurotic, let alone psychotic, you'll understand that context starts to weaken in them, especially if you've been with them in the beginning stages and the thing gets worse through time. Right from the off, context almost like disappears. So you're talking to them in context, and other people are relating to them with a context, and suddenly you find out that they're not even hearing you. And it can be very frightening because, we're talking like we're
Yeah.
diagnosing it. When it's happening, you don't know anything about it. And you go, what's wrong with them? Don't they remember? We said we were planning to go on this picnic today, right? What are you talking about? Right. So the context drops out. And now you're talking to somebody who's even worse than a little child. Because the parameters of their thinking, Jesus, I think it's an aberration of the left brain, because the left brain is meant to, hyper focus like a microscope on reality. Yeah, but can overdo it. So we want to have a big debate about why they're like this. Yeah. Well, it's just neurotic, right? It's just neurotic. And so the whole country has become neurotic, if not psychotic, because context has dropped out the bottom. Mm-hmm. So now Donald Trump can't go around there, on the sweetie machine and put it through your letterbox. But what can happen is that he can make an ethos in the States and in the world where people are less inclined to listen to those who are not in context. He can create an ethos where the rational sort of re-enters, and people start to wake up from this sleep of Sauron. It's like a Theoden waking up from the programming of Wormtongue, and sort of shake this off. That's in the short term what I think, because remember, it's helped by the fact that the left's narrative is so pathetic that it could implode, and also by the fact that things have gone to an extreme. And people realize they need to rebuild their culture. And I think that it will bring a lot of people back to work. Things do need actually to be physically rebuilt. And that's all really good. But see, at the same time, don't forget the lesson of history. Less than 100 years ago, think of what Seattle looked like. Think of what Anchorage in Alaska looked like. Think what Spokane. We're talking log cabins, right? And tumbleweeds going down the street. So again, in order to shake off the doldrums and shake off the fear, we can build again. Mm-hmm. Right? We're not talking 1,000-year empire. We're not talking the Roman Empire. 100 years ago, most of mid-America was, log cabins, steam trains, and coal mines or gold mines, whatever you want to call it. Right? Not that long ago, folks. Yeah. So if there's a reset, guess what you should be thinking about? That you are going to be on a building again. And Donald Trump is certainly thinking like that. Yep. So yeah, there's a lot of destruction, a lot of burning. So hell what? Get muster together and build it again. This time build it better. Less brutalistic architecture, less of that, less of the concrete and steel. Look at it, that some stuff has to go. And then you say, I'm going to build that again. We're going to get better architects. We're going to get better designers. We're not going to make it look so brutalistic and faceless, and all the rest of it. So there's another conversation there. But the idea, basically in a nutshell, is you can build again. Show the comportment of what Western Anglo-Saxon man was capable of, and be the envy of the world again. And don't get feminized, and don't listen to the ones who want to detract from that. Yeah. Have a very, very solid masculine attitude towards all of this.
Yes, beautifully put. And I feel like, what's the phrase? TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. It's a very strange thing to witness in people, because people literally become so deeply irrational and to the point of narcissistic and pathological, or is that the right word? Yeah, let's go with that. Like you just explained it, and to watch people's reactions, and because they're so anti this personality, forget about the person itself. They're so anti the personality and what they've been trained to think about this person, Donald Trump. They're going to vote for these other beings who are literally implicated in some of the most, what's going to come out, what's already starting to come out, let alone what's already been pieced together by alternative journalists and researchers on the internet. is going to shock people. It's going to shock people to the bone. And they're willing to just like, nope, we're going to go with Biden and Harris because we don't like Donald Trump. Like the level of like childishness and immaturity. And there's probably another word that I can't key in on because it's so absurd to me. I don't know what the word is, but it's beyond childish, and it's also alarming, I guess is what I'm saying. Like it's alarming to see that a segment of our population actually think and respond in that kind of way, where they're going to give over freedom and vote for basically tyranny on all levels, but because it's the comfort food. Like, I feel good. I feel good listening to this person. He can't remember anything, but that's okay. Like, I feel good. He doesn't offend me.
Yeah, that's a very strange syndrome. And again, it shows that there's been an infantilism, which is good because it supports my work. I've just come out with work on that very subject in the last couple of years, with the Dragon Mother thesis. And I can't help but think that the timing, unplanned as it was, is so apropos. Because the heart of that thesis is the feminization and the infantilism of our times and the emasculation of our times. And look around you, it couldn't be better. If I'd have said this in the 70s or 80s or 90s, it would have been totally dead. Now it's completely apropos to what's taking place, because there is exactly that. This, you have to understand then the psychological roots of, radical socialism. And this ties in the feminist movement, the suffragettes, and onwards, there it goes. And if you can track it back to deep father hate or even autophobia, just take it back to self-hate, I think that opens a lot of doors, and that's why I've not been too much caught up in the political nonsense, because that's just, a fleeting version of this. I know a lot of people disagree, thinking, oh, the world is burning, this is the end of it. Right. Look back in history. There's nothing going on, not the mass immigration, not the multicultural nonsense, not this ultra feminization, not even the economic meltdowns. Go back to the 70s of the Thatcher era, the winters of discontent there. Look it up, you can go back to the 1950s and 60s with the Paris riots, students rioting, and all the way back. You can go back to the fall of Iran, for goodness sake, and you'll see the same patterns over and over again. You can even go back in America to the 1930s, with the shooting down of ordinary workers in the streets. That was all covered up, during the Depression. And there's been actually several other moments in American history. Did you know that during the period of the Weathermen and the Black Panthers, 65 bombs were set off in California alone?
I had no idea.
Yeah. So don't tell me anything's new. This is the thing that really disheartened me, that people have such a shoddy memory of their own things that happened in the streets of America. Assassinations, bombs, 65 bombs alone in America, in California alone, set by terrorists. Black Panthers, Trump, BLM. Look, for goodness sake, right? Why are people so amnesiac when it comes to their own history? I'm not even an American, and I know more about American history than most people. And I'm not saying that with pride. I'm saying that, bashfully. But so this, and that was just in one state alone. And the arms and the guns and the Libya role, sending in the guns, we still have it today with Islamo-communism being a major threat that almost nobody's talking about. The only ones who are, we have on our show, and on Enslaved and whatever. Well, who else is talking about it? And yet it's one of the mega threats. It's one of the, overarching threats that surround a lot of what's taking place. As I told you, China was involved, but there's other forces at work to undermine America, especially one that might look like it's returning to any kind of, traditional values or whatever, because that is on the table. That might happen. And there are many groups in the world that are deeply, deeply threatened by that. And in those groups, there are billionaires. Because we said earlier, we laughingly said it earlier, but it's true that, left-wing people and socialistic people thinking of themselves as deeply humanitarian have billions of dollars. Like Bill Gates would be a perfect example. And you see, this is all smoke screening.
Yes.
It's like something crazy, like, out of the Man with a White Cat, Inspector, and James Bond sitting up at the top of a mountain, Dr. Evil, and people can't see it. The strangest thing to me is you can't see it. What's wrong with Hillary Clinton's face that you can't tell, or her husband, or even these creatures? Is there something wrong with you that you can't see the emotional plague dripping from their faces? That to me is more worrisome than the creature itself. The people think they're wonderful and stand for me. I'm going to vote for them.
Right. Right. No, that, and you just, yeah, I mean, it's just innocent perception, right? Having the ability to perceive reality for what it is. And that's exactly what it's been like for me. Take all the research on all these characters aside. I've been like kind of a forensics investigative detective into the nature of this reality and the kind of the sock puppets that are on the front stage, the props and stages. And all I have to do is look at their pictures, just look at the popes. Like, oh my God, like just look at the popes and tell me you don't see a demon. If that, don't tell me, like, really? Because if there was a devil in human form, there you go. There it is. And yeah, it's so I guess that's just, that's where I get a little frustrated sometimes, where it's not a matter of, people say like, oh, but that's your perspective. It's like, that's not my perspective. I'm just seeing, it's like blue is blue. I'm just seeing what's there. Please tell me you see something, you see the same thing. But aside from that, I want to allow you to respond to that, but I also want to have you talk about this feminization aspect. You brought it in the Dragon Mother. And I definitely want to give space to that too, because I feel like underneath all of this that's rooted in, and that's definitely been rooted into the eugenics paradigm as well of the genetic manipulation and gene splicing, and then also injecting fake estrogens in our food supply, processed food, chemicalization, the water, and to demasculinate the man, hypermasculinate the woman, and literally to invert the polarities and weaken our society, to basically make us, unable to see what we would normally be able to see if we were rooted in ourselves.
That's right. That's all it is. And it's been going on for a really long time. Masculine women are an obscenity to this Gnostic cult. Masculine men are an obscenity. They don't like what we've built in the West, and they've been gnawing away at it for decades, through your Fabian socialism, through the Jesuitical, and that's broader than it sounds, because they're connected to the Knights Templar groups and stuff like that. So occult societies have been gnawing away. Sabbatines, one could go on at length about the actual groups. But again, all that matters is that they have lots of money, so they've been able to undermine the American government, putting their agents in from things like Consul and Foreign Relations, from groups like the Skull and Bones Society, right? Opus Dei, there's a load of these groups that work for international concerns, mostly out of the City of London, but other places as well. Like the Round Table Group, for instance, would do. I mean, the CFR is just the Round Table Group in America, you know what I mean? The Templars have 1,000 different media organizations and other charities. The Templars and Hospitallers were always into charities. That's where the word hospitaller comes from. Our word hostel, hotel, and hospital come from a secret society, right? Who dealt in, they were like apothecaries. And under that rubric, they were able to mess with your mind. It went into this in Architects of Control. They posed as healers. And of course, there was an element of that. But they're the first tax collectors. They're the first ones who had tax exempt status. These are incredible people, and many, many royal houses, like the House of Savoy, or what's that one, Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, you name it. All these extremely powerful royal families are intermingled with these groups. They serve one another. So there's a network of these people, and they're mad. They're pathological. They're part of a Gnostic cult. And so they have their internal rivalries. And so these internal pillow fights that they have often appear on the surface in our history as rivals between different kings, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, all sorts of bizarre wars, right, that erupt, or actually just, the Napoleonic Wars would be very similar to that. We know them in history school as, oh yeah, the expanse of different empires, but really what it boils down to is pillow fights between half crazy Habsburgs, Hanoverians.
Such a good way of putting it.
The Bourbons or whatever. The whole thing can be limited to some Monty Python, pillow fight between the same family. I mean, the thing is, 100,000 dead. It's absolutely incredible, right? Some Blackadder bizarrity. And at the end of the day, it's just, because some king was affronted. And then as a bizarre result of these wars, and it is partly comedic, say you have 8 sons in a family, and this is very, very traditional, 6 to 8 families in a Plantagenet family or a Tudor family or what have you, right? Being man, the actual kings were the older brothers who were more warlike, but they killed themselves off before they were 25 because being warlike, they would charge off at the slightest affront and have a duel and get themselves killed. And after this happens, right, and this goes right back to King Richard the Lionheart, the lands of the world started to be run by the pesky little thing at the end of the line, the weakling, the coward, the sly worm tongue, because all the other brothers were dead and in their tombs already. So the little thing, the little pasty, worm-like, sly, impotent, feminized thing at the end of the dynasty became king such and such. Now, there are exceptions to this, but by and large, as time went by, there was nobody left to run. And that's also where a lot of the daughters and the sisters, like Mary Tudor and all of that, got to be in power. And of course, you only have to look at that. You only have to look at the slaughter scene of Elizabeth I and Mary Tudor being worse. But you look at their reign, and then this doesn't even mention these Eleanors of Aquitaine and unbelievable stuff. People can go to my Female Illuminati website and look at it all up. So there were no better. And in fact, some of them were very, almost worse, right? So you have this paradox that as we've progressed down in time, the image that women are all sugar and spice and all that's nice has been literally embodied without a single iota of proof. Quite the reverse, right? Mm-hmm. So we already have now one of these, I call them mysteria, things that you shouldn't think about, things that should never be installed as an idea, and yet there it is. And in its place, it's in the place of a greater idea. Yeah, it doesn't make you very optimistic. But the thing is, let's just keep it simple. An image of womankind has been installed, which is already false. Mm. That opens the way for then further falsehoods about women to enter into our psyche, which then snowballs again, you see, and then starts going down the line and affecting motherhood and whatever. And then, of course, as I've always said in my work, from architects and control and before, there is a hidden hand at work. Because the powers that we know as the Frankfurt School or this Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Taoiseach Institute, all of these think tanks discovered that they could use women as a doomsday weapon. Mm. And that's when they started with their suffragettes and women's rights, right? And all that nonsense and the secularization. And they got enough boogaloo women, most of them upper middle class, by the way, which should always have alerted you.
Is it true that Margaret Sanger is the originator of both Planned Parenthood and feminism?
No, she wasn't the beginner of feminism. That started with Mary Wollstonecraft, okay, and Mary Shelley and a whole bunch of others, and they were in a family network. Mm. It's strange that a lot of the leading feminists in England, I can only talk about England, were members of a socialist network. Mary Wollstonecraft was married to William Godwin, who's a leading socialist. Their daughter was Mary Shelley, the lady who wrote Frankenstein. Oh yeah, it's bizarre stuff, and there was others as well. So then later on, you get your Redgraves, an acting family that's very, very connected to the Fabian network. So it was a network that was subsumed. You see, the really weird thing is, as people will know if they read the Female Illuminati material, it's a group of extremely wealthy aristocrats that I refer to just colloquially as the black nobility. It's not my term. It's been used by Dr. John Coleman.
I was going to ask you about that, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and he refers to it as Committee of 300 or whatever. It's a network of families that, and they can be Protestant or Catholic. This is the strange wrinkle, right? Mad as they are, right? So they then have been socialistic in the true meaning of the word. See, that when we use the word in a party political way, we're not even really that close to the. This is something I can add to the authors who beautifully speak about socialism and the rise of world socialism, and these are wonderful, wonderful works. But they actually leave something out. We had the wonderful Rodney Atkinson on, and he's a case in point. When I brought up the question of the black nobility, he was like stum, right? Had no clue to connect it. So I say it's God love them, but there's weaknesses in their own narratives, right? This group has a very long history, but the place to start is when one branch of this group that we're talking about converted to Judaism. It was just done. It wasn't done for religious purposes. It was done for geopolitical purposes in their fight against the Roman Empire. This was a group of people, from Parthia, a House of Edessa, they're called, who actually had claim on the Roman Empire. So if anyone thinks the Roman Empire was oppressive and bad, how about this for size? There was worse, ready to take the throne. But in their machinations, they were thrown out of their own country, right? So they were quite destabilized and disoriented by the time they got to Syria and Palestine. And this was in the 1st century AD, right? Or just maybe slightly before. And the thing that happened was that they converted to Judaism just so they could have lackeys and just so they could, have a force that they thought. Because don't forget the Jewish people in Judea at that time were instigating the famous Jewish revolt that changed the face of Judaism. So they were extremely revolutionary. They were up on their hind legs and were very revolt-oriented. Crazy, right? So the Parthians thought, this is brilliant. Let's convert, because they won't have anything to do with us. We're just a foreign power. We'll convert to Judaism, and then they'll embrace us, and that's exactly what happened. And they became known as the 4th sect, whereas the papal Christianity that we know from the Vatican, the normal papal, and this was very much to do with St. Paul's, concoction, his presentation of Jesus in the Bible, is known as the 5th sect. I mean, these are terms that are used in Christianity, right? And those two groups were at each other's throats for years. They really have very little in common. They both know about a Jesus, right? Or they hold a Jesus in common. And so they definitely have certain things in common, but they're very different in many, many ways. And the one way that fits our conversation, is pertinent to this conversation, is that the 4th sect were the first revolutionaries that we would claim to be socialist, right? Oh, maybe an important thing to say at this point is that now, and this might have some relevance to people, and it also does to podcasts we've already done, because they converted to Judaism. That is why I do not myself subscribe to any Jewish conspiracy, as it's usually been framed down through the centuries, the great Jewish universal conspiracy. That's a dead end for me, because even though so many Jews are top heavy names, like in the Bolshevik Revolution and other instances of this, and certainly the Rothschilds and the Bank of England, it's not to deny that certain Jewish families have not played a role. But number one, they're not really Jewish. If you get the point I've just made, and of course it is a brief point, that there were Parthian Edessans, there's a different cabal behind the Jewish front. I think that needs to be factored in, and it's not by anybody. So there, again, go figure. It's just, Jewish accusations from morning to night, and it's so erroneous and it's so false. And my work is, always looking to unpack that. But the main thing is that this is a socialistic group that then has affected the European history, all the way down to the modern day. And this is an aristocratic group. So the long way around answering a question, the feminists are funded by that elite group, who came out of some very aristocratic houses, by the way, not just the ones I mentioned, but even higher up the ladder than that. And, to the point where even some of the extreme aristocracy, I actually know some of these people, their names, but, just rather not mention them, right? These are people whose parents were deeply members of the Fabian Socialist Network. They're the richest oligarchs in the land. They constitute the blinking black nobility. They're dyed-in-the-flesh socialists. Marx and Engels look like, bunnies compared to these people, right? So the movements that we know as socialistic, or especially the Fabian socialistic model that turned up in England with its Harold Laskys and all the rest of them, your Sidney Webbs and all, and Bertrand Russell, absolutely, but George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, and their coterie, and that coterie spread many sons and daughters out through the world, many actors, playwrights, right? It just blossomed from there on, and it became the Labour Party. It became the British Labour and Liberal Party. The Liberal Party in Britain is really a Fabian society. They used to be called the Fabian Society. Then they just changed their name to Liberals, and then Liberal Democrats, and I don't know what they're calling themselves now. But this group is actually liberal. Was the Fabian Society, and that's a secret society. So the black nobility's party in Britain was known as the Liberal Party, for goodness sake. Now, even though they didn't quite have the clout to beat the Labours and the Conservative, that wasn't the point, right? That's not the way it was. They weren't looking for power on that level, because even your British Labour Party ended up fusing with them, and is just jam-packed, as is Conservative movement as well. So just it's really amazing when you get into the occult roots of all of this stuff, But basically, in short, your feminist movement, I believe, dates to these people. And when you look at these Dworkins and these, who am I thinking of? The ones that would be Jewish, on the surface who run in feminism. It's meant to be top heavy with Jewish females, all of that. Don't be fooled by that. These are Sabbateans. These are Frankists. These are agents of the black nobility and Fabian socialism. Their Jewishness is for show. They're not religious Jews.
Yep.
They hate Jews, for Christ's sake. And they have a whole little, scheme that they have to implicate Jews down the line. They do not represent all Jews. They themselves are not religious Jews in any true sense at all. Mm. Yeah. And so, that's why my work in this movement has been very controversial. And I've been hinterlanded because I bring all of this to bear. Mm. I've been hinterlanded by this movement, in all of its comportments, and also have limited my own interviews, with them as well, because you're talking to people on an infantile level. And I get sick of it at the end of the day, so I'd rather go on shows like yours and others where, people of intelligence are interviewing you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to ask you this. So when you say black nobility, are you speaking of what's known as the 13 bloodline families?
Many of them are in this group. Yeah. Remember, black nobility is just an overarching term. It doesn't really mean anything. I used to use the term black lodge as well. Those are just umbrella terms. Yeah, you have to get down into exactly what you said. You have to get down into names, and I do that on the websites. But what I try to do is I try to go to the highest manifestation of this, like on the aristocratic level. Mm-hmm. Not too much to your Karl Marxism. I'm a bit suspicious of all of that because those are just people that come and go. Yeah. Right? The movement predates them by centuries. And also other than people like Dr. John Coleman, maybe the Lyndon LaRouche crowd, this would include people like Webster Tarpley, people like that, Webster Tarpley. There are very few people who actually mention the aristocratic level. So I like to bring that back. I like to echo that in my work. Not that I subscribe necessarily to everything those men say. I haven't found anything in, Dr. John Coleman I find too wrong. But, that doesn't mean I sign on for everything that these mentors of mine are into. But I believe that the kernel of their work, which does include these families, the noble families, I definitely have been personally fascinated by that. And, there's still work to come on that. There's still work to come on that, actually. We're preparing things now that, oh yes, I've got 2 mega programs. One on the fall of America, not relating to, well, it does relate to modern things, but it's more of a history going back. And then I've got a thing called the fall of Europe as well, which is a multi-program, magnum opus, starting with the Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Germany, the fall of Germany, fall of Russia. I'm going to try to give my overarching views. That'll be probably next year because there's still a lot of other little programs to finish. I told you 2020 has been very productive for me, actually. But down the line are going to come these much greater, broader spectrum looks, which will include, one of my focuses is going to be speaking a lot of things that others know about, in terms of Second World War, First World War, fall of the Ottomans. It'll be a lot of work that is already known, but I will always be, boomeranging back to something that's not well known, and that is the role of either, first of all, secret societies, and then these aristocratic characters. Mm-hmm. I think that's a little bit unique and needs to be, needs to come into view again, into relief. And I'm very happy. I've done the overview of that. I've done a few intros, and they're absolutely fantastic. It's drawing on, probably in the region of 35 years of research and work. So yeah, it'll be all sourced and very, very sourced from very eminent people. The guys who before censorship came in wrote these histories of these 30-volume histories of the world and those kinds of books, that before the Fabians really took over and were able to suppress these works. Well, I've been researching those, so I've got quotes from, eminent people, even people within the Bank of England, even within the cabal, even from within groups of the Round Table, because their own vision was so correct. They thought, I'm going to speak loudly. Some of them were more hidden and conspiratorial and clever, but others were more, grandiose about it and verbose, and didn't think that there was any need to really hide, the plan, for goodness sake. And I found their quotes. So it's like the strongest sources you can have, I have in my work, always have had. And now again, it's studded with those works. So it makes it easy for me to have to explain too much or convince people anymore. And also, as of 2020, why should any conspiracy person, unless they're fucking crazy, right?
Yeah.
But a normal, rational conspiracy person has won the day. They never have to stress or anything again for as long as they live, to anyone.
So true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I feel like they're gonna have to replace Columbus Day with Apology to Conspiracy Theorist Day. I think
They
that
sure do.
in 2020, it's really 2020 vision, right? I mean, that's kind of what's landed for me is this. It's like it's 2020 vision, and there's nothing to prove, right? Like I realized this months ago, is like, oh, the time to actually prove anything is way over. Like this is end game. This is like not end of time, not end. It's like, how did they say? It's like it's end of times, but not end times, right? That little distinction. Like this is not the end. It's just the end of a time. It's the end of an era that I think is definitely for you. I mean, I know for you in the last 35, maybe 40 years, you've been feeling the swelling, the underbelly of this inflammatory condition going on where most people are just walking along. Me, for when I was growing up, just walking along all good, but I could still feel some unrest. I didn't know what that was. I didn't have the context or the information, but eventually I felt like, wow, something's really not right here. 9/11, that I think that was a major catalytic awakening for most people. And then, the trickle down effect to now. And I think COVID's like on a level of 9/11, but actually way bigger because the whole world, this thing went around the whole world unavoidably through this whole lockdown shenanigan. And whatever divine or malevolent forces that were in opposition, I think the effect of all this has been omnipositive, even though long game, maybe not in the immediate sense. It hasn't necessarily been omnipositive in the sense of like, there's a lot of quote unquote negative things that have taken place, no doubt about it. But what I mean by that term is, I mean like where this is going in my perspective anyways, like the awakening, the level of healing or the opportunity for healing to happen, where before, I don't know. I don't know if this was possible before without this particular stimuli.
No, it wouldn't have been. Because remember, at that time, the Democratic Party, the socialistic groups worked somewhat underground. They kept a very good smiley face, and they've made a biggest mistake of their lives. And I think Bernie Sanders knew it, so that's why he pulled back. I think they've had a lot of internal rivalry over this. Some of the more crafty ones, your Jeremy Corbyn's, the crafty one said, it's the long march through the institutions for a reason. They told the others, let's keep it like that. Long march means slow march. The others were too wild. The others are too frenzied.
Yes.
Literally foaming at the mouth. So they broke with Fabian, socialist means Fabian from Fabius, the Roman, who whittled on a stick waiting for Hannibal. Slowness, right? It's called war of attrition. And that was the way that the socialist movement were able to take over every government in the world. But they broke their own raison d'etre. They actually broke protocol and went out raving in the streets. But and some clever people were waiting for this, hoping that this would happen because they are mad. And that's what happened. The dam busted, and they've done the worst thing that they could do for themselves. They've shown their underbelly. And the other side, yes, wasn't very strong. I certainly am very unhappy with the way, conservative-minded people, especially in America, have gone about. I was actually horrified by it. But look, that can end. It can come back. It really can. And but people sometimes need to see the narrative in the streets, like the Australians are doing right now, and others. So when you see the craziness of this, then I think that a lot of sound-minded people will just either default to a kind of a liberalism, and that's it's a step in the right direction, or will actually say, I'm dropping every single socialistic idea that I've had. I see it's bogus. I see it's a fraud. I'm kicking myself forever listening to it for 1 minute. And, I'm going to seek out other heroes. Let me read such and such. And then, oh my goodness, what have I been missing? Read your Alan Blooms, and many others I could mention, you see, and find out how you've been lied to by the media particularly. And that will be a help, So just start getting into more right-wing material and find out that you've been programmed to believe it was something really evil and vile, and it's certainly not. And also, again, don't forget the what built civilization. Just like I said earlier, you know, it looks all frightening when things are burning. Just look in your history books. I used to stand in Palo Alto, you know, many a day, and they had this shop at the corner. I actually don't know what the shop was. It might have been a real estate agent's at the corner of one of the streets there. I think it was California Avenue, and it had old pictures, you know, old lithographs of the area of Stanford University, Palo Alto. You know, the old ones taken, you know, in the 30s, and some went back to 1890. Not very long ago, it was wood houses, you know, and taverns and stagecoach stops. And so for somebody coming out from the outside of America, you know, it's a young country. I'm sad to see that it's gone so wrong in the experiment, but I have ultimate faith that you can build again, because not too long ago, you know, it was very, very primitive. And people know that. So there should not be an ounce of pessimism at all. I mean, even if the burnings, even if what was going through, you know, like a Kristallnacht, you know, when the socialists burned the Reichstag in order to blame it on their enemies. Look, even if it was like worse, you still should be able, from a masculine perspective, to say, right, sleeves rolled up, mate, give me my shovel. We're going out there to build it, but we're going to build it even better. You know, so I just cannot be pessimist. I don't know why that is. You know, I'm pessimistic in the short term when I see, how people are forgetting their past, forgetting their history and all of that. But in the widest concern, when it comes to building civilization again, I have no doubt that we'll have to do it. That is we're not going to fall. We're not going to let these destroyers win. Not on my watch, we're not.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, that's a great kind of concluding sentiment right there, because I feel like the existential concern, the angst, the fear, the doubt, the concern, you know, obviously with the whole programming around our conception of virology and what a virus is, and it's this spooky thing that's going to lurk around the corner, and it's so intelligent that it's selective, and it's environmentally selective. And if you're a Christian going to church versus a Satanist in Vatican or whatever, I don't know, like you know, or you know, like all these weird regulations and restrictions that are put in place because of what we think we know of a virus. But what a virus is, according to the real virologist, I don't mean a Jesuit priest called Dr. Anthony Fauci, and a eugenicist, I mean like the actual virologists that are coming out and basically saying like, hey, like you're not going to catch a virus. It's not a germ. It's not a bacterial infection. It's not the same thing. But we've been told a story, in the fear attached to that story is the real infection, right? The fear and the psychosomatic influence of the mind-body connection. And that, in my opinion, is that the real infection. But the reason I bring that up is just to this point that this whole thing has led to so much irrational fear and so much just leave it at that. And so what you're bringing into this conversation right now is this understanding of like, hey, we've been through way worse, and we'll continue to go on. This isn't the end. You know, just 100 years ago to this date, we were going through the Spanish flu. That was way worse than this. That was an actual pandemic. Like, and they did the face masks and the regulations, everything, and then we made our way through it. What we're dealing with right now is really just a psyop, right? It's just a psychological operation that consciousness is cracking through. And there's all the reason to be positive, even if even if our temperament is thrown off temporarily, right? The long game, where this is going and where this can go, is ultimately better than it has been. That's what I get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's just propaganda from the Ministry of Propaganda, pretty much as usual. What you've got to do is know thine enemy, right? When you understand that there is a legitimate enemy out there and you're able to identify it, that helps a lot. You know, and yeah, they can expand their power as they have done through California and whatever. And the media, or Hollywood as we've called it, we've always laughed at it. But conspiracy people have consistently pointed to the vileness of that organization. They're right. They were right, and they're proven right. So this is a nice moment to pat yourself on the back if you've been into this material and been reading and spending time and money on books on the conspiracy. You know, we may argue about which guy you're reading and, you know, their value and all. But despite that, the fact is, if you've been checking out videos and you've been doing work and other people in your family thought you were crazy, give yourself a nice big pat on the back. You've done right. You know, you've supported us, and you've supported yourself with knowledge, and now we move to the next step.
Yeah.
Because great, you know, that's what my work is with greater and greater circles of understanding. Don't stop here. Don't become myopic. That's a weakness. Continue to think. Continue to keep your mind open about many of the things that you've heard, and move forward. You know, and widen that sphere of understanding, like I've done through all of my life. You know, delving into different subjects. You're on the trail of a predator, and therefore a very clever one. So it takes a little bit of extra time. It's not, you know, you can't be going with a big club. You know, this is far more of a Sherlock Holmes type of matter than just wielding a club and going to smash the thing on the head. It's ready for you when you come at it like that. So, you know, and also being a Randian, you know, I am in complete support of strengthening criticism, judgment, discrimination. Those are to be sharpened. So the answers, you know, are quite simple. Our schooling and our parenting weaken those things. Don't say, don't speak up, don't trust your intuition, you know. So there's a road back from that, right? You know, where you definitely sharpen your discrimination. You do judge people. You are critical. I'm not for weakening those things. I'm for strengthening them. And then on the basal level of everyday domesticity, the best protection you can have, forget politics, is the legal system. Yeah. It's not all bad. That's been the reason why it has been presented on umpteen Hollywood shows, and why the doggerel has gone around anecdotally, you know, that legal, there's nothing worse than a lawyer, you know. Don't you understand why that has been put around? Pick up A Rape of Justice by Eustace Mullins and throw all that nonsense in the trash. Sure, there's bad people. There's bad people down the market. There's bad people in government. There's bad people, you know, in the local police, in the local supermarket, you know, and the electricity board. Yeah, there's bad people in law. But do you know what you're missing when you wholesale throw out this, your legal protections down the tubes? Then don't come to me blaming me that there's a world system out there that's crushed you underfoot. Yeah, I got that. But I also know the way to get out of it. So, you know, I mean, what can one say? So anyway, Ronnie, man, thanks a lot. I love talking with you. It's a pleasure. And we'll have to have you on Slave to unpack some of these other questions of healing. I've got a lot of different things to run by you there, you know, so we'll have you on before Christmas for sure. But again, big thanks for having me on, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Let me know. And then as far as everybody, where obviously unslaved.com is I imagine that's still the main hub.
Oh yeah. We just put up a new premium today on Hegel. There's plenty of others to come. They're actually on shelf. See, I haven't been able to get some new equipment. So I can't edit them, but they've all been filmed and they're all on deck. Stuff, you know, my entire Idealism series is finished. We've got Gnosticism 3 and 4. You know, we've got Monstrous Feminine 2 and 3. Right? These are second to none. And there's others on the Jewish question, Jewish conspiracy, question mark. I can't even remember the list. Oh, Catastrophism, the whole thing on Immanuel Velikovsky. Second to none, brilliant presentation. They're all filmed and done. They just need edited, but you know, I don't take the risk of ordering anything today, you know, that's electronic, because if there's something wrong with it, how are we going to send it back, you know, under this lockdown situation? So I really gratified that people are being patient with that. But we try to put out a little bit what we can in audio or video, you know, but there's a long list of things that are already on the shelf, can be blasted out very quick. And then there's even new material. I think I touched on that. But yeah, in the meantime, we've got great guests on, and we're covering extraordinary subjects. This last one on Gnosticism, I think, is one of the best things we've ever done, actually.
Yeah, beautiful. That's amazing. Yeah, for everyone listening, like, this is really just like surfing the waves of a you know, passing waves here on an ocean. Like the depth that Michael goes into in any topic that he does is second to none. Like, it's astronomical. And like I said, like there's like a top 5 in my personal Rolodex of truth and disclosure speakers, and they all have, you know, particular themes and particular things that they go to. And each one of you guys, I would say, in these top 5 are so detailed and so deep down dug, and also particularly older in life experience, which you would imagine you would have to be after all this time, like, of digging, you know, to be able to come to the wisdom, plus the ability to communicate, and the knowledge to be able to connect so many dots. Like, I'm just like I'm only a couple of years in this particular, outside of the medical field and the vaccines and the food and agricultural system and some of that aspect. But getting into some of the stuff that we've just skimmed the surface, I'm just now like making up for lost time, right? Because of the intensity of the times and everything that's coming up to the surface. But I'm always astonished by the connections that you and some of these other individuals that I just think are just like at the top of that Mount Rushmore. It's quite amazing. And so all that to say that Michael has a vault, literally a vault of things on so many different topics that are so worth your exploration. Like, we don't need to keep going through the rehashing of the media. And it's like, yeah, look, hey, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, yeah, but we could keep pointing to that over and over and over and be like, the only reason I pay attention to it, just on that note, is because I'm constantly astonished by how absurd it is. But even in that, I have to check myself of like, well, then why do you keep watching it? Why do you, I mean, it's like, yeah, obviously, you know how absurd it is. Why don't you pay attention to something else? I got the message. Okay, this is the show. This is all made up. These people are all probably criminals acting as news anchors. Okay, got it. Huh. So now maybe I need to spend my time, you know, absorbing real knowledge, real gnosis, and Michael's information is second to none in what he provides. I want to just kind of emphasize that point.
Yeah, thank you. Because I haven't got distracted. You know, this is just a passing charade, the passing circus, and it'll all be just a, you know, muddy newspaper headings tomorrow. I try to deal with the eternal, larger questions, so that no matter what arises in the everyday life of politics, you have an anchor, you have a compass to negotiate it by. You know, so nothing is trivial. And the work I've done has been for when I say 35 years, I don't just mean that spuriously like a lot of other people try to pull that stunt. I actually mean it and can prove it, because I don't come from the outside. I don't come from any other world but this world. You know, didn't do anything else. Maybe a bit of music, or, you know, there are other things I've done, but no, the main thought when it comes to thought and the interests that I've had, you know, have been exactly as they are today. But because we have members now and things like that, I can dig out from the boxes, from the archives, you know, from the crates, stuff that I just loved and had to, it was heartbreaking to put it down. And there was that one day, oh my God, one day we'll get to this book. One day we're going to get to this teacher. One day we're going to get to this man. My work is only there. My motive is to bring the teachings of just a handful of people, you know, like your Dr. Coleman's and others, to the fore, like an Immanuel Velikovsky and a Wilhelm Reich. And do you know how heartbreaking it was in the 90s? Just absorb that, read that, want to scream that from the rooftops, but you had to put it away because it just wasn't the time, or it wasn't the context, or something else wasn't right. And, or to do it would have been to do desecration to it. If I'd have chosen other platforms with other people, you know, a lot of different situations came up, you know, it would have been done. But in the end, I would have hated it. I would have hated it because of who was involved and the way it got done and the dynamic, because I only work with pure people who are very respectful of this knowledge as I am, you know, and I was tempted at several points, but I passed those tests and I kept them in the crates. So do you realize what a delight it is, you know, to be able to bring out some of the works that I'm just going, thank goodness, you know, I'll be able to share this now with people. And also my own experiences made it all the better. You can add a little bit deeper insights to it. You know, this last one we just put up today, I mean, I'm just going to go and watch it again, you know. I'm thrilled at the way that came out, you know, to explain this one aspect of philosophy, you know. And because of members now, we have that chance in the last 3-4 years. So I'm over the moon, you know. And I said, this year has been very, very productive as well. But again, mate, absolute thanks to you and for the rest of your work that you're doing. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I look forward to connecting again soon. And as always, pleasure and honor to have you, and look forward to connecting.